we already have one finals member settled with the OKC Thunder, the one team that I think we were all pretty confident would get here and has lasted through the playoffs. The other teams we thought were confident in getting here have not lasted through the playoffs. So shout out to the OKC Thunder taking care of business in 5 in emphatic fashion in Game 5. As Mike mentioned, we'll talk through that. But excited to talk through, what could be, the last podcast, most likely covering the New York Knicks season. Maybe they get to Game 7, and maybe we'll be talking about Game 7 on Monday, but my guess is not. But we'll talk through ways that they could potentially get there, so I'm excited to do so.
It could be the teams that traded away Paul George and Domantas Sabonis in the NBA Finals here. But yeah, let's start with how the Knicks get back in this. We'll talk OKC and how they dominated so easily, and if they can dominate in the finals, which I can think they might. But yeah, I mean, Game 4 was just Indiana just absolutely killing it. Halliburton had one of the best games like ever. 32, 12, and 15, no turnovers, 37 and a half minutes. 75 passes made, 24 potential assists, 38 points. I mean, it was just like one of the best ball handling performances we've seen in a really long time. We talked about how the Knicks have been really prone to giving up big point guard lines here. I'll start off the top. We'll talk about Knicks adjustments. I think one thing on the table, if Halliburton's going to kill you like that, and he's been killing Mikal like most of the series, like is OG guarding him on the table? And I think like Josh Hart could maybe start and then guard Siakam that way. But yeah, let's kind of start with the Knicks. I think that's the big question, and I kind of want to jump off from there. Do you think Austin, like they start Mitch Robinson? That's kind of the big question going through my head at this point. I kind of think they switch to something else. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm conflicted here. So there are a couple factors. Normally, I would say, I would agree with you, but we did see Cat collide. I do think he's going to play tonight. I feel pretty strongly about that, but he does have that knee contusion. And then I'm probably going to steal Drew's lines here, but the Cat Brunson minutes have not been good defensively. Just getting Brunson, into action, and then Cat in the ball screen action. You're talking about two poor defenders. The other three Knicks defenders are above average, but you're kind of targeting the two worst to be involved in pick and roll actions. So I'm really not sure. But on the other end, like Cat's offense is so valuable in the series, as is Brunson's. I do think they should try and maximum stagger them just so you have like one, because they also are the offensive hub. But it's gonna be hard to go away from both of them. One thing I'll note on Mikal versus OG and the defensive matchups is I don't think Mikal is necessarily a bad defender. I think he's really good at, getting in position and around screens and stuff. But like, Phoenix Mikal would force a lot of turnovers, and this version of Mikal just is not a disruptor. He's just a stay in front, stay at home kind of guy. And Halliburton has 0 turnovers. I think you really have to make him uncomfortable and make him play in spaces. And that's kind of why I agree. Like, I don't think Mikal's done as poor of a job as maybe, Halliburton's huge numbers have shown, but I kind of would try to switch things up and put OG there just because OG is so much more disruptive. Yeah. And I think that the Pacers are way too comfortable in their offense. And like, I don't know, Siakam has been more of a second side attacker, transition guy. And like, I do think OG on Siakam makes some sense as we talked about to start the series, but I do think you need to switch up looks. You do need to make the Pacers offense just a little more comfortable. So I kind of agree with you on all fronts. Like OG, I would try OG on Hallie. I don't really think that the starting Mitch versus starting Hart matters that much because at the end of the day, Tibbs has no problem kind of subbing someone in and playing them the last 24 minutes or 21 minutes of the half. So I don't think the nominal starter necessarily matters.
I just think it's a little cleaner for matchups. Like I don't really want to put I don't really want to put Cat on Siakam, and I don't really want to put Mitch on Siakam either. So I think it's just a little bit cleaner to do it that way. That's kind of my thoughts. Dink, do you have any thoughts on starting lineup, and then we could get into the Cat Brunson stuff a little bit more for sure.
Yeah, I think the challenge is while you identified, we can try to disrupt Hallie a little bit more with OG. I think Austin also alluded to. I don't know, like OG is really great isolation. He is very good at screen. I mean, he's great at all things, but like quick decision, screen navigation, I don't know, is that the area that he's going to put a lot of pressure? Like I kind of think that if you want to go in a different direction, I kind of think like maybe you should be considering, starting
Deuce,
Deuce
yeah.
McBride and full court pickup and try to disrupt the flow of their offense by doing more full court pickup type stuff. They obviously got to change something defensively because like their options are not working, and the options are to change scheme or to change personnel. The personnel options are fairly limited in terms of what they can change, and because of this problem that we've talked about in terms of like the Cap Brunson staggering and the in how do you do that effectively when they're your offensive hubs for both. So I think it's a pretty tricky situation to diagnose and figure out. I do agree that just generally, I think Tibbs is a person, he's a man of habit, and he's liked this starting unit all season long. He only was able to move off of it when he felt he was essentially forced off of it, and essentially when a player supposedly brought the idea up himself. I think at the first sign of weakness of the new lineup, struggling in game 4, that might make sense to go right back to the original starters for game 5. That wouldn't surprise me from that perspective. That would be much less surprising to me than inserting like Deuce McBride or DeLon Wright or some disruptor into the starting lineup to specifically try to deal with Halliburton. So I think you're potentially onto something. I also agree that I don't know how that ultimately like impacts things from a minutes allocation standpoint, because as Austin alluded to, Tibbs is willing to kind of rework the rotations on the fly by leaving somebody off the bench in for an extended period of time. So does it even matter how they start if they're just going to do a quick sub and kind of get into different lineup combinations? I don't know, but I guess I'd put Hart starting over Mitch maybe as a slight favorite for me tonight. And then I think regardless, I think you're going to see a rather quick Karl Anthony Towns substitution. And then the question is, do you then see a Brunson substitution instead of the full first, maybe towards the end of the first, and fully stagger Cat and Brunson a little bit more? That's what I'm kind of interested in seeing if they really try to attack, because I think it's become more and more clear as the series has gone on, not only that they have struggles with both of them on the floor, but that they've held up better when Brunson is off the floor than when Cat is off the floor. And I think that's more due to the replacement value that they have in terms of defensively. They have Deuce McBride and DeLon Wright as options instead of Brunson that can disrupt the Pacers offense a little bit more than what they're currently doing. And that seems to be, they're not really giving up much offensively when Cat is the sole offense versus when Brunson is. But that all changes if Cat is limited in any way, shape, or form as well, which we don't know the extent of. Like, contusions are tricky. They're usually not things that keep you out of games, but they are things that can, kind of disrupt fluidity and confidence in terms of attacking the basket and drawing contact and different things like that, which Cat needs to be really effective. So, I think there's a better than 50-50 chance that we get back to the original starting lineup, but like Austin said, I don't know how much it moves the minutes allocation in total.
Yeah, 2 things to add to that. I would have been like, I think Deuce is like a flip for the reasons you were saying, but like the fact that they went to Landry Shamet late in the game when Josh Hart fouled out, that was stunning. Yeah. Tom Thibodeau said that it was because of size and shooting. Deuce is obviously smaller, but as you were saying, kind of, he was guarding Halliburton a little bit late in the game, which I thought was interesting. So I think it's still possible Deuce starts, but yeah, the crux of this whole issue, and we talked about it a lot last time, was how unsuccessful they've been with the 2 stars, Cat and Brunson, on the floor. And really, Brunson is the numbers that really stand out. We talked about the on-off splits, but just looking at Brunson specifically, when he's on the court, they have a 129 defensive rating. When he's off the court, they have a 98 defensive rating. Like, what a gap. But yeah, we touched on it, but Austin, I know you kind of want to dig a little bit more there. How do they manage this too bad targetable player issue defensively? Because it's really, really hurt them.
The more I look at it, I think this is probably going to be a deviant take from you guys, but I would actually consider DeLon over McBride, because I think McBride is, I like the idea of picking up Hallie full court and make him work. But McBride's really not an off-ball disruptor. He's pretty much just an on-ball guy, and I think DeLon has sort of this dual functionality where he can guard on-ball and he can disrupt off-ball. And, DeLon's limitations are really on the offensive end, but, like, offense hasn't been an issue for the Knicks. Like, they just put up 121 points. Like, they're shooting fine. You have Cat and Brunson. Like, I don't think McBride's that good offensively either, so, like, McBride can shoot a little bit, but I think I would rather have like DeLonge's better playmaking and defense over like off ball defense and just his size over McBride's. Because like maybe McBride is a Brunson replacement for minutes, but like playing Brunson and McBride together, McBride's good, but then you still have to hide Brunson somewhere, and you're really small.
Yeah.
And DeLonge's a much bigger guard, so DeLonge was a plus 11 last game. Small sample in 9 minutes, but he just does so many like little. He wins all the 50-50 balls. Advanced metrics have loved him for years. And then I think you just have to try something. So I know that probably doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but I think I would try DeLonge here.
First off, how dare you? How dare you come onto this podcast and suggest that anyone else would be more of a fan of DeLon Wright than me? I am a full DeLon Wright stan, have been for many, many years. I just didn't think Tibbs would actually go in that direction, but agree that DeLon Wright, from a size perspective, he adds defensively a lot of the value. The one challenge with DeLon, as much as I love DeLon, you got to be somewhat careful about the lineups that you're playing him with, because if you play him with Mitch, you have two guys who are not even willing to look at the basket, and like how much offense can you generate when there's two guys who are not even willing to look at the basket? That's the only tricky part. But certainly you would be starting him in place of Mitch if you were kind of going in that direction. But I think that makes sense. The off-ball disruption stuff makes a ton of sense, because I think if we get to the finals, which will, and we see Indiana and Oklahoma City in the finals, I think one of the things that we're going to be talking a lot about is how just generally Indiana is such a unique team to defend because of all the ball movement. And to disrupt them, you need a team that is actively disrupting passing lanes, and they haven't faced a team in the Eastern Conference that really does that in a significant way. And so DeLon Wright would be more of a fit to do that than Miles McBride. And I think that's an interesting solution, one that's a little bit outside the box, and one that does not feel like a Tom Thibodeau solution, but one that I agree with would make more sense because of DeLon's size, which Halliburton's size is a real issue to deal with for most other point guards that are trying to defend him.
Yeah, and just to hit on some issues that the Knicks have to get better on the periphery. Transition stuff is pretty crazy. The Pacers' transition frequencies went up in every game of this series, and the Knicks have been at 9.9%. It's been a huge issue for them. They had 16 second chance points on 5 offensive rebounds. How does that even work in the last game? Like, they're getting like so many little edges and stacking them up on top of just getting better shots, getting more open shots. They are killing them in wide open threes. It's 71-34 in this series. It's crazy what the shot quality is for the Pacers. But is there anything from like a structure/scheme standpoint, Austin, that Knicks could do better to kind of get back in this?
I think we've already been talking about it. Like, it is somehow fix the defense, because like the Knicks offense isn't really the problem, and nor did we think it would be. Like, we thought this would be a high scoring series. We thought the Knicks would be able to score on the Pacers, but the Pacers, would be able to get out in transition. I do kind of want to shout out like Rick Carlisle. Like, it's his brilliance is coming through once again. Like, at the risk of like burying my head in the sand, like I still don't think the personnel on the Pacers is like as good as like a lot of these other teams, but like clearly they're doing what they're doing for 2 years straight. Like, I think Carlisle is deserves a lot of credit for the adjustments he makes and this like the scheme, just everything that he makes. Like, the Pacers are so good at closing out. Like, sure, they've had good luck in the injuries they faced, but they've also closed out these teams really well. Like, a lot of these series where they were the dogs and then there was an injury, they're closing out in 5 games, or these games aren't even going to 7 oftentimes. So a lot of credit to Rick Carlisle there. He seems to be really good at knowing his personnel, knowing like I could not believe how much Tony Bradley is being played this series, but I think just like everyone else is getting bodied by Mitch under the basket, and like Tony Bradley gives up so many things, but one thing he doesn't give up is just as many offensive rebounds, and he's in there just to limit that, because Carlisle identifies the problem in real time and makes an adjustment. Like I would have never done that as the head coach. One thing that I think was sharp that does make sense is Ben Shepherd, but I think that's another one that's kind of like you wouldn't expect it in the conference finals. He's just such a good defensive matchup for Brunson, and he's kind of been able to shoot the 3 ball, which I think has been a bit unexpected at the level that he has. But and then another one is like going away from Mathurin. Like, we mentioned it doesn't seem like a Mathurin series. I know Mathurin scored 20 points, but he played 12 minutes. Going Shepherd instead of Mathurin when Mathurin's been your 6th man for the last 2 years is another adjustment that, is a no ego kind of like, this is what we need to win. just out of the box, going with the best option. So, in defense to Tibbs, like I think Carlisle has more of these levers to pull than Tibbs does, but I think at the same time, like good coaches either make lever pulls that you don't think about or make them seem more effective than not because of the way that you're utilizing these options. So, I mentioned DeLon as a potential option for the Knicks, but really the Knicks just like they need more. Like everybody that they have is going to bring some sort of downside with the like they could bring something that they don't have, but you're also bringing some level of downside, and then you're kind of like plugging one hole but then opening a different one. So we'll get into predictions in the future, or in a bit, but I don't see like an obvious fix for the Knicks to sort of win 3 games in a row. I do think they win today though.
Yeah, and to your point, Rick Carlisle had like a bad challenge, and that was like so rare for him to have a mistake. Mark Daigneault had more coaching issues than Rick Carlisle did, and Mark Daigneault's been quite strong. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But yeah, Dink, do you think anything else kind of happened here with the Knicks to kind of get back in it? And anything else you want to note on Indiana? We didn't really talk about Mathurin. Got to the line 11 times, as Austin noted there. Really killed. And then that was the other thing. Talked about the open shots, but the back cuts, that really killed them in the last game. And the fouling, the 4 fouls in a row in the fourth quarter, like that was inexcusable. But just playing a little bit sharper from the Knicks. Anything besides that you think they need to do to kind of get back in this?
Yeah, I think just in general, with the back cutting and stuff, the pressure that that Halliburton is putting on the defense in terms of being able to get to the paint, and McConnell as well in terms of being able to beat their first man off the dribble, is forcing kind of all eyes on the ball handler and then allowing kind of backdoor cuts. We saw that be very key and integral at the end of game 3. Game 2, as well, where Josh Hart and Nobi were getting back cut a good bit as well. In terms of personnel for the Knicks, I don't think there's much to do. I know Tommy Beer, who we've had on the podcast before, who covers the Knicks, been writing a lot about how Thibodeau and the coaching staff had all these games during the season to try to test lineup combinations. Didn't really use the regular season to that manner in terms of trying to test out different combinations, and now they're trying to find things on the fly. I think Austin highlighted a lot of the strengths of Carlisle. And the differences between Carlisle and Tibbs is like Tibbs sort of waits for a problem to emerge before trying to solve it, whereas Carlisle's a little bit more proactive on that stuff. So like I think most people would have thought Campaign's probably not a great fit for the series against Indiana just generally, and Campaign was out there in game 1, right? Like in a way that like I don't think Carlisle is necessarily going to have long leashes with those. We haven't seen Jarris Walker all series as like an example of a player that we didn't think was a great fit for the series, and Carlisle has agreed and just not played this series. So I don't think there's much to do from a personnel standpoint. I think the Knicks still, with everything that's been going on in this series, they had a massive lead in game 1. That was like a miracle game that they blew. Game 2, they were in it, basically coin flip game towards the very end. Game 3, they win. Game 4, they end up losing by 9. It kind of felt like it was like more away from them than the first 3 games. Like it felt like they were playing kind of uphill a little bit, but they've been in all these games. So like as much as we're harping on them being down 3-1 and them being at personnel disadvantages and different things in terms of chess pieces that they can move around the board, they're still in these games. So I think it's one of those things where I don't know that they have additional levers to pull, but the just like if they play better lever, can they do that 3 times in a row? It's doubtful. But like that's the lever at this point. Like I think they just need to play better, essentially. In game 4, they just didn't get enough out of sort of the secondary pieces, right? Like OG Bridges kind of came on at the end by making some shots in the fourth quarter to get himself to 17 points. OG played fine during the course of the game. Mitch was really ineffective. I think one of the things that like I had identified early in the series was like, how is Carlisle going to try to cut out the legs from Mitchell Robinson? Because Mitchell Robinson seems to be holding a lot of things up for the Knicks from a lineup standpoint. And he's figured it out with Tony Bradley. Not the solution I ever would have anticipated, but he's figured it out with Tony Bradley that, Tony Bradley is just keeping Mitch off the offensive boards. And that's like really, really neutralizing Mitch in a big way. So I don't think there's much from a personnel standpoint. I'm interested to see if they try to stagger a little bit more. I'm really interested to see if Brunson continues to be hunted in the way that he is, if Tibbs makes the decision he's made with Cat many a times during the regular season and at times during the postseason, which is like, we have better options. Like we just got to go forward with a better option. And it might not be the better option that everyone thinks is a better option. It might not be the option that is going to make things look pretty on the offensive end, but it's a better option for us to win. And I'm interested to see if that happens again, if Brunson is struggling as much defensively as he has throughout the course of the series, because the possessions that he gets switched on to Halliburton, I mean, it's just so easy for Tyrese. They're just like, he's like walking into like practice shooting threes essentially over Brunson. And it's really like changing the tide of the game. So that's the big question mark for me. I think ultimately that and Cat's health. If Cat's fully healthy, you can afford to do those things. If Cat is meaningfully limited, you really can't afford to do those things, because then you lose the offense that you've had in such a great way. So the Knicks, are playing a little bit with like one hand tied behind their back with the way that Indiana has exploited these two-man combinations with Cat and Brunson. But they've still been in all these games. So I still think, it's not a good chance, but I still think there's a chance that the Knicks can put pressure. And it starts with tonight. They win tonight, and then Indiana, there's pressure to close out Game 6 at home, and then you just got to play one great game at a time. And they did that in Game 3. They were able to pull out the win in Game 3. So we'll see. I'm not super optimistic on it, and I don't think there's like a skeleton key to fixing all of this for New York. I think they've been kind of, put in a little bit of a corner here. But I don't think they're dead.
Yeah, a few things popped in my head there when you were talking. Cat has had a few knee contusions this year, including in the playoffs. He's been able to play through them. He did have a knee contusion earlier, twice on 2 different occasions, missed a game for it. So he could be a little bit limited. We'll see on that. And you were talking about, hunting Brunson. It reminded me when you noted in our Slack that, Halliburton got pissed off when they called timeout when he got switched on Cat. And the last thing I want to mention to kind of tie the series together, we could talk predictions in a second. But you mentioned like Tibbs being so late to the party with like lineup combos. Who's not so late to the party on this? Mark Daigneault. Like Mark Daigneault's been playing all these guys all year, picking the spots. We've seen all the combinations. Yep. He knows everything he can do. He knows when to do it, and he's like ready to go with it. And that's been a really big attribute and a positive for them as well. But anything you want to add, Austin? Then we could kind of talk. I think we're all going to probably pick Indiana at 6 at this point. Maybe some of us pick Indiana at 5. But anything you want to close out before we talk more Thunder, Austin?
Yeah, I did think of one thing. Tibbs is not a big cross matcher, not a big like try weird matchups, but like we've seen other teams put their big on Aaron Nesmith, and it's a little bit tougher with Nesmith shooting this well this series. But like I do think like desperate times call for desperate measures. One thing they could do is either put Mitch on Miles or start Hart and put him on Miles, and then leave OG on Pascal and leave Mikal on Hallie. And like the solution here could be put Cat on Nesmith and put Brunson on Nembhard, and like it would be harder to keep Brunson out of actions, but you can we've seen teams pre-switch to get their centers out of action, and just pre-switch Cat onto whoever they're going to try and get the off-ball screen onto, and just avoid Brunson and Cat in pick and rolls altogether. Granted, you do have two. So basically, you're forcing Nembhard to run all the actions instead of Halliburton, and you're forcing Nesmith to be called over. And granted, like Nesmith has shot the ball really well, but we've also seen this strategy work sometimes for Indiana. And like I don't think that Cat on Nesmith is necessarily the best answer, but you need to try something, and it's like the best way to keep those two out of like ball screen actions. And like I do agree that Hallie has been cooking Brunson on isolations, but like I think you really want to avoid Brunson and or Cat in two-man actions, and that's like where Hallie is truly deadly. So it's not something that Tibbs typically does, but like I would consider, instead of switching your best defenders, maybe thinking about just where to hide your worst defenders, even if it's something more unconventional. I don't know if you guys have thoughts on.
Yeah, I think they've tried a little bit of that with Cat on Nesmith at times during the course of the series, but like sticking to it in a committed fashion. The other part of this that's really tricky is it's really hard to cross match with the Pacers because they're willing to play so fast. And so, yeah, I mean, worth a shot on some of this stuff. All of the decisions we're talking about would probably end up being cross matches anyway. Like if we're talking about OG switching on to Halliburton or different things, like I don't think that's the way Indiana wants to defend something on the other end. So I think they all would be this way, and it's much easier for Indiana to deal with cross matches than New York because of the pace that they play with compared to New York, where Brunson will just kind of slow things down. But yeah, these are all potential options for the Knicks. I think ultimately, like as we've seen in some of these games and some of these series, though, you just got to come out and play harder and kind of get in people's space a little bit more. They are not getting in Halliburton's space in any way, shape, or form. I think that's something that needs to be fixed. And so whether that's OG, who's probably the best at getting into space of any of the Knicks defenders, I think that's the big change that they need. Sort of like what we saw with the Wolves when the Wolves went into Game 3 against OKC, and they just played like much more aggressively in OKC's space, and we're allowed to with the refereeing situation as well. But I think that's the Knicks' ultimate solution is just like play better.
Yeah, I'll
Unfortunately,
say a couple like Hart and Mikel were really, really bad. I gave up the Mikel over mega luck sack, all time luck sack on that one. But yeah, I think the Indiana closed it in 6. But yeah, you need up and down roster up and down needs to step up here. Austin, do you have it sounds like you're Indiana 6 as well.
I am. I'm kind of where it sounds like Drew is, where like the Knicks have been in every game. Game 1 was a historic meltdown. They are not. They haven't played worse to the level of a 3-1, but obviously, like we don't deal in sort of like we deal in black and white. Like it's a win or a loss. That's what it is. And like you can't be 2.5. You can't be down 1.5 to 2.5 or 1.7 to 2.3. Like they're down 1-3, and like for that reason, it's hard for them to come back. But like when evaluating this series, like they haven't been outplayed that poorly. Like really, if they just take care of the ball, like the Knicks have been a top 5 taking care of the ball team in the regular season, and they're averaging 15 turnovers a game. Like they're probably 2-2, if not 3-1. But again, like it's just you can't make up those games. You can't get those games back. So like I feel very confident that they win tonight at home. But just sort of the way the Knicks play, they kind of need to go all out. And like the Pacers are really good at getting on transition and wearing them down. Like in any one game sample, I think I still favor the Knicks. But for them to win 3 in a row with 2 changes of venue feels really difficult. So just probabilistically, I'm going to go.
Are you on the Knicks? Are you on the Knicks tonight then? Did you take Knicks?
I am on the Knicks.
Yeah.
I took a 4.5, moved it out to 5, and then it got hit back in my face. So I think it's like a juiced 4 right now. I think it's going to close 4.5, and I do like it there. I think the 1-3 down 1-3 at home spot is really strong here for a team that really hasn't been outplayed by that much.
What do you think, Dink?
Yeah, I'm with you guys that I think Pacers in 6 is the logical prediction spot at this point. And I think all of those things that Austin just alluded to in terms of the difficulty of winning 3 in a row, changing venues multiple times, and also only having one day off in between for the team that's more shallow in terms of depth that they're comfortable using, and the team that's already a little bit more banged up with Cat, dealing with a knee contusion. We saw Neesmith, who's questionable as well, was able to play effectively through his ankle issue. I think those are all big factors to overcome. I'd love to see the Knicks do it. It would be very cool to see that the city would be ablaze, and I'd love to see that here in New York. But I think most likely outcome is Pacers in 6 right now.
All right, so all in agreement there. Let's go to OKC. I mean, by God, I don't even know where to start. I mean, I was thinking about it when I was hiking today, and just how many A+ moves they made. Certainly the SGA trade with Paul George and Jalen Williams picked in that trade, and drafting Casey Wallace, picking up Caruso in a trade, signing Hartenstein. Everything's A+. Getting Wiggins really cheap, getting Isaiah Joe really cheap. The only bad move they've done is sign Usman Jang. Certainly you can go back to Pokashevsky, but hey, they got Pokashevsky, so they could get good picks with those tanking stuff. But yeah, just first thoughts on OKC getting here, Austin. Maybe what's most impressive, or any take it however you like, whether it's just the building steps they've got to get here.
Yeah, Presti masterclass once again. I think he's been a bit more of an ethical tanker than some of these, but I think he still did it sort of the way that you would draw it up in terms of be really bad, then be really good, and just hit on all your draft picks. He's traded really well. Yeah, I don't think there's anything to say about Presti that we haven't already mentioned. They're also set up really well for the future. We keep expecting them to trade for Lauri Markkanen and unload the chest, or we thought maybe they might be in on Siakam, and outside of Caruso, which they got super cheaply, they got such a steal on Caruso. They haven't really given up any of their treasure trove of assets. So they still have a lot of picks coming. They have Topic coming. It's just crazy. And this is year 2 of the Chet SGA J-Dub. It's crazy that they've been so good with so little, and they just keep adding more and more. Kaysen keeps coming. At some point they'll run into some cap issues, and maybe they have to get rid of Dort, but I don't know, like you have Kaysen ready and developing. Aaron Wiggins would be, might be another cap casualty, but he would be in high demand for pretty, like they should trade him. Like who wouldn't want Aaron Wiggins? Yeah, just crazy depth. Like Jay Will has become a great passer and has developed the three ball. Like how many teams would Jay Will not crack a rotation on this? It's just up and down the roster. Yeah, we can talk about X's and O's in a bit, but yeah, just willing to give them their flower. Like they signed Isaiah Hartenstein for $30 million, and like everyone was like, "That's an overpay," but it's like a necessary overpay because he's so good for the roster. And then they run.
That's what I want to talk about.
Postseason, and they haven't even needed him. Like, okay, we'll just play him 17 minutes and we'll still dominate. Like he can just be our backup big and guard the Jokic's of the world. Like it's crazy.
Good, Dink.
That's what I want to talk about. So before I get into that, though, I just want to note, out of the last 15 years, the Oklahoma City Thunder have 2 years, that they've won fewer than 40 games. Like as a team that is thought of as like a team that like was tanking and all these different things, 2 out of the last 15 years, they've won less than 40 games. There's just so many teams in a stacked Western Conference during much of the last 15 years. It's like ridiculous what they've accomplished in this time. But what I wanted to note was, every time there's a big name player available or rumored to be available, even like Giannis as of late that people are starting to talk about, everybody's always talking about OKC. They're always talking about OKC because OKC has all the assets in the world to potentially make those types of moves. And what I love about what Sam Presti and this organization have done is they recognize that sometimes you don't need the superfluous excess stardom. You just need these very specific things that tie the whole thing together. You need the rug that ties the whole room together. Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein this offseason, perfect. Absolutely perfect pieces for what they were looking for. They needed Hartenstein to have another big, to have depth to get through Denver. They don't have Hartenstein, they don't get through Denver. We saw that the lineups without Hartenstein or Jay Will, where Chet Holmgren was the sole center against Denver, Jokic was cooking. And that would have been a problem for them if they did not have Isaiah Hartenstein to get through that. So they knew that they needed that to get through Denver. Alex Caruso has been the guy who's been able to lock up anybody late game situations as needed, wreak havoc, cause turnovers, lead to easy offense. A guy that you look at his offensive statistics and you're just like, oh, how does Alex Caruso like really move the needle significantly? And it's not his offensive statistics. It's all the easy offense he's creating for everybody else, that when he's on the floor, everybody else gets easier offense because he's getting you into transition and kind of easy buckets and different things. And it's like just such a deep understanding and appreciation for basketball roster construction from Sam Presti in this organization. And even the idea of like drafting Topic, who they know is out for a year, but we have so many picks and we don't have the roster spots, and like watching them work through all these picks that they have in the future, where they'll keep like kicking the can down the road and turning them into future picks and whatnot because they know they don't have roster spots. It's just so smart. All of the things that they do are so smart, in a deep understanding of like, we're playing this. It's funny, a lot of times, people will be like, oh, you can't make that trade. We're not playing Madden here or something like that. Like you can't get all the stars on one team. And in some ways, Sam Presti has been playing the league exactly like how I would play, one of these franchise modes on a video game, which is like, just give me all the picks. Give me all the picks over and over and over again. Anytime I have something that looks like it's not that useful to me anymore, I'm going to go get picks with it. Or anytime I have something that the market wants more than I think it's useful to me, I'm going to go get picks with it. And on top of that, like developing players and developing coaches. Mark Dagnall was a hire that, didn't get a lot of attention, didn't get a lot of credit. He's in his 5th season now, and he's been allowed to grow alongside with this team. And I just think, man, everything that this organization has done has really supported it, and it should be revered in a way that so much of the conversation around the NBA is built on stars and big markets and all these things. And it's like, here's how you do it. Here's how you do it in a smaller market. Here's how you do it. And yeah, there's some good luck involved in terms of like identifying the right players and having them develop and not get hurt and different things like that. But like, this is an effective way that you can do this. Like teams can be better than the size of their market based on the quality of their management. And I think OKC deserves to be revered and shined in a way that should give optimism to all the markets in the league and turn some of the conversation away from who are the Lakers going to get? Who are the Heat going to get? which big market team is Giannis going to go to? Who are the Knicks going to get? Should the Knicks get Giannis? Like, let's stop talking about all that stuff and let's just talk about like really good basketball and great basketball organizations. And that's what I'm hoping this NBA Finals will be a little bit more about, especially if it ends up being OKC and Indiana, because those are two teams who have done it right. Indiana's never tanked. They've always been an organization that have been like, no, we're going to keep trying to win the best we can. We'll keep moving pieces and flipping pieces around, but we're going to keep trying to win. And I think I think people are going to turn this, if this is the NBA Finals we get, into a, can the NBA survive this? Will the ratings be without the big markets? And I just think this should all be celebrated. This is what every fan of a smaller or medium-sized market team should be looking to and holding their franchise accountable in terms of their management, that this is what we should be striving for. We should be striving for greatness. It's out there. It can be done. These organizations have done it. And OKC has just been absolutely the standard in the league the last 15 years. They don't have a championship to celebrate for it. I think that's going to change this year and in the next few years. And then in the totality, 3 years from now, we're going to be looking at in the totality over the last 18 years. This is going to be a team that's been in the conference finals, 6 times and won 3 titles. And we're going to be like, that's an epic run. But it will take winning some titles, which they are poised to do.
Yeah, I want to just hone in on one more thing. Just like the 2022 draft class. I know, Austin, you're a pretty big Paolo hater. Did they get the best 2 players in that draft, like Chet and J-Dub? The only other consideration is Paolo. That's it. Now, I don't know. I'd rather have J-Dub over Paolo. I'd rather have Chet over Paolo. I assure you. And then the last thing I want to say is God, that to trade for MVP when everyone who I respected thought SG was really, 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 really good, and to get him all those picks, oh my God, this. I remember writing up. I worked for Roto-World at the time when that trade went down. And I was rapping on new shit that happened out of nowhere. And I was oh my God, they gave up that much. And just what an absolute home run there. But yeah, did they get the best 2022 players, Austin? Sounds like you're emphatic yes.
Yeah, I do. And I don't think it's that close. I think as an asset, I think Paolo's pretty close to the top 2 just because of what he could be. But I think in terms of who's the best players in the draft right now, I don't think it's close whatsoever.
I think you agree.
One thing I wanted to add on to Drew's point is
chime Dink in there, Dink, then we can kind of move on.
No, I agree, and Austin can go with whatever he's going with.
Yeah, I was just gonna say to Drew's point, I think people are gonna say oh, you lucked into this, you lucked into Shea, or you lucked into this. First of all, there's no luck. They've developed and made these picks. But secondly, to say that other teams can't do it is just frankly not true. The Phoenix Suns were in the NBA Finals with a team that was Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, and DeAndre Ayton. Not only were they in the finals, they were one of the best closing teams we have ever seen historically in the fourth quarters. And you know what they did? They blew it up for Kevin Durant. And you see now Mikal Bridges and Cam Johnson, what they go for on the open market separately. Mikal went for $1 billion picks on his own. Cam Johnson, his value is insane. And not only that, but each individual piece has been worse since they left the Suns, since they left that system. Mikal has never been that good again. DeAndre Ayton has never been that good again. I don't think they're that good individually, but they all fit together so well. And when you go out and trade your entire future plus your 2 really in-demand 3-and-D wings for Kevin Durant and it doesn't work, what do? You go and then add Bradley Beal. It's insane how these other teams have been in position to do these and they have not chosen to do these things. To say that it's a blueprint that's not possible to follow. These players are Alex Caruso is not in low demand. It's hard to acquire an Alex Caruso, but it's possible. Every team had the assets to acquire Alex Caruso when OKC did. Right? It was Josh Giddey in a first or something like that.
No. There were no first.
No first. It's just Josh Giddey.
Trust me, as a Chicago Bulls former fan, there were no picks involved, which still is maddening. That of the 35 first-round picks that the OKC Thunder have, the Bulls couldn't spare one. They couldn't get one. They couldn't just hold their hand out. Could I please have one pick? Could I please have one first-round pick with Alex Caruso? We'll take Josh Giddey. No, not even a single pick.
Yeah, so I think if there's one thing we can learn as outside of a betting sphere and just an overall what did we learn as a basketball community, team fit, roster fit is so important in a way that it isn't in baseball and football and these other sports. It matters somewhat, but basketball is such a roster fit game. And I think if there's one thing we can take away from this OKC run, it's how can you add players that fit together well?
And then just like on top of the team building, like look at this roster, man. Just like all these guys on top of the offense, but like how many of them are like deflections machines, blocks machines, just passing lane machines, which against Indiana, all that passing, that's gonna be really fun to talk about. But yeah, just this team is so disruptive, and that defense is so sticky. And hey, where's Nico Harrison at, man? Defense wins championships, man. So, but yeah, that was really the headline to me. Owen, the F5 Owen had mentioned that they have a plus 100 turnover differential gap, like beats everyone by 30, which is insane. But think as far as like what we've seen on the court from this team, dominating another 30+ win. I think that's their fourth. But how did they do this, man? Besides like what we already knew, anything you saw on the periphery there?
It's just, I think the overwhelming impression, if you sit there and you watch an OKC basketball game and you watch them work on the defensive end, if you just like took like a collage of tweets or comments about the OKC Thunder defense, I think some of the things you will see repeated over and over is it must be like hell to play against this team. It's so hard to get a single shot off. It must be exhausting to physically and mentally try to keep climbing the hill each and every possession just to get a good look off. And I think that really wears on teams throughout the course of the series. And I think in a lot of ways, in retrospect, kind of looking back now at the previous round in some of Jokic's struggles towards the end of that series, you look and you're like, man, like this must have been overwhelmingly exhausting for him to try to handle all of the offensive decision making every single time down the floor when there's like four hyenas around his legs and his arms trying to get the ball and away from him. And I think that's what it must have felt for Anthony Edwards. I mean, we were talking about how it just looked at different points in the series, and you saw this a little bit last year as well in the series against Dallas, that Ant just looked a little bit gassed in terms of like what he could potentially give. And it's just asking too much to create all the offense and go and take on one of the biggest defensive responsibilities. And it's the nature of the waves of defense that OKC is throwing. And Austin was also talking about the development of these players. I remember thinking about how Toronto with Masai Ujiri the last 4 or 5 years ago, the wave of development that they were having with Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby that were kind of coming through, and the way that they were developing these guys where you'd see in the regular season each guy like take on a little bit more on their plate. Like all of a sudden you'd see them start running some post-ups for OG and different things, and you could tell that they were kind of like developing the individual skills kind of like one at a time, layer stacking those skills on top of one another to hopefully develop a bigger and better player. I think it's interesting with OKC. They have all these, they draft within somewhat of a prototype, which is length and athleticism, and trying to like, we want long arms. We just want long arms. You look at like all their guys, J-Dub's, the most notorious for this, but obviously Chet as well. Kenrich Williams even is like way bigger, like wingspan than his size. And they want all these like disruptors. And so they draft for that prototype a bit, but you look at how guys who you would not think would be disruptors with their hands, with deflections and different things, like Isaiah Joe, like he doesn't look like he has the defensive skill set to be a player that's somewhat disruptive, right? He's kind of lean, he's a little bit lanky, he's not necessarily the quickest guy. It's tough for him to kind of get through screens and everything, but watch how these guys work, and he works through screens and he gets his hands kind of out, and they have a lot of guys who are naturally skilled and talented as deflectors, but they also coach it a lot. And I think that's the thing that I see with them defensively is the skill layering on the defensive side of the ball, where it's like offensively, we're going to have you guys play your roles because we've got Shea and the whole offense is built around Shea, and we know what we're going to need to plug in around Shea. But defensively, we're going to skill layer you guys so that you can be defensive. You can be a defensive player in every part of our system so that you can be interchangeable when you come in and out. And so it's, in a weird way, you looked at that roster and you looked at it and you're like, man, there's a lot of one-way players, or players you would think would be one way. And they've developed them into better two-way players. And I think Boston did this too. I think in a lot of ways with Peyton Pritchard and Sam Hauser last year, I was surprised how well they held up in the playoffs. And I think it was like, okay, like, Pritchard's obviously layered on more offense over the years, but we're really going to focus how to layer on more skills defensively so you can hold up. And I think OKC, they just never put out a guy out there that you can attack. There's nobody out there to ever attack. Like Isaiah Joe's the closest thing, and he's held up okay when he's been out there. So I think I just wanted a testament to the development of players at that organization, because I don't know if, J-Dub certainly wasn't consensus. one of the top players available in that draft, but he's been consensus now one of the top players in the league from that draft. And I think if you look at most of the guys that they've developed and come through their system, there's not that many that you would say like, oh, like that player was super, super talented and didn't live up to their potential. I think Pokashevsky is like the one guy that you could point to and be like, oh, it didn't really work out with him. Most of the guys that have come through have gotten better in a meaningful way at the ways that impact winning in basketball games, which is just a testament to the quality of the organization.
I'll just say one more thing that 9 turnovers from Julius Randle and Naz Reid combined, like, really sums up the series. Like, you want to get the ball in the paint, A, good luck with the rim protection, and B, like, you're going to get stripped, like, probably 30% of the time with the hands that you had noted there. But, yeah, anything you want to add, Austin, OKC-wise? Certainly could talk to Minnesota has a big offseason coming up. Player options for Julius Randle, Naz Reid, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, restricted free agent. We saw Terrence Shannon break out. They have Rob Dillingham, Jalen Clark also coming up. They're going to be very interesting. Chris Finch said that they're going to be, trusting the front office there. But anything else OKC-wise? Certainly we didn't give Shea enough flowers. Like, good God, man. Like, what a freaking pro season run. But anything else you want to kind of wrap it up with on OKC or Minnesota?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple things that I wanted to note. OKC's depth we talk about a lot, having, being able to go 10 deep. But I think that the way that they leverage that depth is incredibly smart. And, like, I don't think it's talked about enough that, like, Alex Caruso comes in and he uses his fouls like they are weapons. Like, I have this many fouls to use. He had 5 fouls in 24 minutes, but his foul rate goes down once. Like, he rarely fouls out, right? Like, he's just using them as like, oh, I'm pacing myself. I have this. I can go try and steal the ball this many times. But you couldn't do it if Caruso's one of your 4 most important, like one of the guys that has to play 35 minutes. They use their depth in a way that they encourage, they don't want Chet and Hartenstein in foul trouble, especially if one of them is just a single big. But, like, they let their other guys, like, use your fouls. We have depth. We want you to be most impactful per minute. And just, like, you cannot call every foul. And, like, Caruso getting 6 fouls to work with in 24 minutes is just not fair. The amount of steals he goes for. And then on top of that, they play really fast. They pick you up full court oftentimes. Just the way that they leverage that depth isn't just, oh, we have 10 players and we can, have 10 different options to use. They leverage them to the fullest of their capabilities. And then the other thing I wanted to mention is, like, I do think that, like, sure, we talk about offense can be contagious. We talk about passing can be contagious. Like, defense is certainly contagious. And, like, there was a moment in the last game where they're up like 27 and Aaron Wiggins gets switched onto Julius Randle, and Randle's, posting him up and trying to get a steal in the paint. And this entry pass, like, Aaron Wiggins does what Caruso did, where he, like, suddenly puts his arm around Randle's waist and tries to swim in front and knocks the ball away and tries to get the steal. And I was thinking in that moment, like, 2 years ago, Aaron Wiggins does not do that. Like, go look at Aaron Wiggins' steal rate coming into the league. Like, he's that's an Alex Caruso move. Or, like, when they bring the ball into the paint, and then you have 3 hands, like, swiping down, and, like, the amount of clean swipe downs at the rim have been crazy this whole playoffs. And, like, that's like a Caruso and Shea thing. Like, that's coming from the top. And then the last note I wanted to mention is, like, we've seen tons of studies where, like, sometimes the biggest improvement a team can make year to year is just continuity. Like, there is a huge boost in continuity when a team plays together with a large core for another year. Like, their defensive rating improves by a ton. Like, their team gets better. And, like, especially with a defense like OKC, I don't think even if you had these defenders, you could just assemble, 10 new players and tell them to defend the way OKC defends, because it takes, like, years of practice and dedication and knowing your teammates and knowing rotations, who to leave, who not to leave, like, not just for the other team, but, like, which of your players is going to, like, leave and how much, when to stunt, when to help. Like, all of these things have taken years and years of sort of, like, cohesion. And so, like, I think that's important to note too, is, like, their patience for not giving away their picks, like Drew mentioned, isn't just in terms of keeping good players, but it's, like, building this cohesive, communicative defense that wouldn't be possible without players that have played together for the better part of 3 years. So I think wrapping it up, like, yes, it is possible. My last note was that it's possible for teams to follow this blueprint, but they also have this rare level of patience that they have exercised that like, you cannot just copy in one off season. This is a slow burn that has been built over the course of 3 to 5 years. So just a lot of flowers for the OKC.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see that kind of return on a Paul George trade. Like we've seen players go at like such a like less price. Because SG, like you don't see star young player. Like SG was a star, man. I remember the Doc Rivers quote. He's like, "Yeah, we didn't give him up, and like they want to get Paul George that bad." But yeah, Dink, anything from you to wrap up with the OKC incredible run, just domination, really from a year now. Like we were really high on them from the Caruso trade and the Hartenstein deals.
Yeah.
We were on them the whole time.
The only thing that I'd note is, we're going to look back, and obviously it would only be fair if I drew this back to Jokic in some way, shape, or form. But Denver taking them to 7, I think, is interesting in two regards. One, it's like, man, how good is Denver? How good is their core to be able to like win 3 games against OKC? But I think it's also like, when Denver was extremely banged up, right? We're hearing Westbrook off-season surgery. Porter obviously like had the shoulder issue. Aaron Gordon barely able to jump by the end of the series, so on and so forth. But I think we're also going to maybe forget Jalen Williams' struggles in the postseason. Maybe Game 7 of that series sort of turned the tide for Jalen Williams, who was exceptional in the conference finals, playing in the way that he had played in the regular season for really the first time since they've been in the playoffs and they've had the spotlight on him, that J-Dub has played the way that elevated his game beyond the way he played in the regular season. He was so good in the series and so consistent, shooting the ball from 3, being the release valve, getting into transition, doing his usual disruptive stuff defensively. And I think what I thought watching the Minnesota series was like, Minnesota wishes they got the J-Dub version that we saw against Denver, because maybe they could have made this more of a series. But the one against Minnesota, when you get that J-Dub with that SGA, like, good luck, league. And I'm hopeful, and I'm interested to see if that was the turning point for J-Dub, that Game 7 of the Denver series, which went deeper than I think we thought it should have because of some of the struggles around SGA. He was just so exceptional in the conference finals, and I'm interested to see if this is now we're starting to build the MJ and Scotty combination with Shea and J-Dub that we had seen in the regular season, but we hadn't seen carried over into the postseason in the way that J-Dub had played in the last 6 games. He's been that kind of level.
For sure. Yeah, I don't have much else to add. I'm excited to talk about the finals. Anything you want to mention, Austin, before we jam out of here?
No, I don't know if we want to talk OKC possible.
Yeah,
Indiana
I could throw some numbers. I was just looking.
Whenever,
so the series total over under games is 5.5. The under 5.5 games is minus 132 on FanDuel. OKC is minus 770 for the series. And I think the interesting one is OKC Game 1 series parlay is minus 310. So like OKC win Game 1 and then series minus 310. I don't know. I kind of like that. And then the Game 1 FanDuel odds, hypothetical. It's funny, it says hypothetical game on there, minus 9, which is interesting for OKC Game 1. Any thoughts there?
Man, so my initial thought was like, man, OKC has been really fortunate this postseason run to not have be insanely healthy. Like they have been very fortunate with.
Are you going indie voodoo doll already?
But my second thought. Well, no, but my second thought was, how many players need to be injured for OKC for this to be priced as pick'em? Like it doesn't. Like yes, they've been healthy, but like if Shea and Chet and another big piece got hurt, OKC would still be favored. Like it. I'm trying to think of like ways that OKC does not win this series, and like it would, with home court and the level of depth that they had, it is hard to imagine. But I cannot bet minus 770, nor can I bet that minus 310 parlay. Like I cannot do that. The minus 9 sounds pretty reasonable to me, especially because like I expect OKC Indiana to be an up tempo game with a high total, and like the 9, it means less than it would. If it was like Orlando Cleveland 9. So like that OKC minus 9 in Game 1 opener before like Indiana can really figure out OKC's defense, because I do think you need a few games to figure out how the shell works and the rotation works. Because like Denver kind of figured out finally how to get those shots, and that doesn't mean they win, but it does mean they kind of get better shots. So like I like that early series look, but I cannot pay.
What about prices. OKC minus 2.5 games minus 120? So could Indy win 2 games off them? I don't know, man. And actually, who's going to guard? Does I assume Dort's going to guard Hallie, but like that's not Dort's matchup though. Like, Dort's more of like the drive.
I don't think I want to bet that.
Yeah.
Because of just variance. Like the Indiana knows, like sort of like they knew they were big dogs against Cleveland, and they sort of like used that variance game to their advantage. And like sure, like before the injuries, they got a bit lucky with game 1, but like they are also really sharp, and they know that that's what they need to do. And like for OKC -2.5 to hit, they need to win 4 out of 5. Like I just think that Indiana knows they're worse and knows they're going to lean into the same way they lean into the start of the Cavs series. So like I cannot pay greater than pick'em juice for one team to beat another team. You also have to deal with like the sort of like zigzag conspiracy theory ref call, like just everything that goes into beating a team that made it to the NBA Finals 4 out of 5 times is just not something I can pay. So that's a stay away.
What do you think, Dink?
My first thought was 9. Minnesota was 8.5. Indiana is being priced the same as Minnesota. That was my first thought, essentially. And I was like, I don't think at any point in this progression of the playoffs have I thought Indiana is equivalent to Minnesota. But I have been historically bad at evaluating Indiana for the last 2 years. So those were my first thoughts. I don't expect to be wagering on the series level stuff on that, but game 1, I also think like long layoff potentially between the series. I think that would benefit a team like OKC as opposed to a team like Indiana that's built on kind of pace and fluidity and flow, whereas OKC is a little bit more based on like kind of disrupting those things and then kind of counterattacking essentially. I would think that would benefit OKC. Like, is all that time off? Like, the best thing that works in Indiana's favor is generally that they take care of the ball. And now they got to do it against the toughest defense to do that, and off of a layoff that's going to potentially impact rhythm. Like, that was the other thought that I had. So maybe a lean on game 1 OKC there, but I'm not touching the series stuff. I've gotten wrecked enough this year betting -2.5 and -1.5 games in series. I will tuck my tail between my legs and get ready for next year.
Props to hit for sure. But yeah, anything else, Austin? I think we kind of covered it. If you want to, sign off notes.
Nope.
Cool. Thank you. Get us out of here.
As always, appreciate you guys tuning in, whether it's on the YouTube page, Established Run NBA over on YouTube. Make sure to subscribe and like the video over there if you're interested, or if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, consider leaving a rating and reviews. That helps circulate this content for us and allows us to continue to provide this free content for you. Appreciate you guys tuning in. If you're interested in any of the premium content, you can go to establishedrun.com. /subscribe-MBA or -WNBA for any of our premium product offerings covering the basketball related things. WNBA season keeps on moving. We're very excited about the work that we're putting out over there as well. So check it out at establishedrun.com.
We'll be back on Monday, presumably to preview the NBA Finals, unless it's a Game 7, which would be wild if it is, and that'd be fun. But appreciate you guys. Catch you next time.